Thank you, Mr. President. The committee substitute for Senate Bill 9, as was amended yesterday on the floor of the Senate, with a few amendments adopted, but the engrossed bill is an attempt to launch a bill regarding drones. The nuts and bolts of it are it creates a new article in the code, and it's designated in the code as Article 2B in Chapter 29, so with new sections 8 in all, I think, 8 new sections in all relating to drones. The first section of the article relates to definitions. It contains a number of definitions of terms used in the article. Second section of the article discusses the applicability of federal law and the rules of the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration. Members who were here last year will remember we had a drone bill at the finish line at the end of the session, but it didn't become law. In the interim, between that point and today, the federal government has made final now some rules, FAA rules, regarding regulation of drones, commercial use of drones. Section 3 of the bill contains some prohibited conduct, and there's a couple subsections in it, but it outlines things that you can't do with a drone, and they include intentionally taking photographs or other images or publishing such photographs without the other person's permission, where the person was being photographed or whose image is being captured has a reasonable expectation of privacy. Drones can't be used under this for harassment. They can't be used to interfere in any way with law enforcement or law enforcement activity. And it says, except as exempted by the regulations of the Federal Aviation Administration. This article now, this section would preclude someone from operating an unmanned aircraft system within 100 feet of a dwelling. Now, we amended that yesterday to clarify that if you're over your own property or someplace where you have a lawful right to be, that wouldn't apply. And it defines a misdemeanor offense for violation of those, violation of any of those provisions. There's also a prohibition on operating a drone while you're under the influence of alcohol. So that's prohibited under this law. Makes that a misdemeanor with a jail sentence and a fine. Subsection D makes it unlawful to outfit or equip a drone with a weapon, with a lethal weapon of any kind. So that's not permitted. Or to operate it with the intent to cause damage or harm, disrupt the flight of manned aircraft. So there's a criminal offense in here defined if you're, trying to interfere with a manned aircraft with a drone. Section 4 of the bill relates to law enforcement's use of drones. And, among the things that we're seeing throughout this country, and the pace of it is accelerating, people are discovering ways to use unmanned aircraft for various purposes. And so Section 4, actually, to tell you the whole story, Section 4 is really where this bill started a couple years ago. It was a deputy sheriff from Boone County, who's now a member of the House of Delegates, Rodney Miller, came to us and said, there's nothing on the books that really gives guidance or control to law enforcement on what uses they can make of drones. So as every member of this body can contemplate, anticipate, there are all sorts of constitutional questions that are raised by law enforcement use of drones, Fourth Amendment issues, privacy issues. Those are addressed in Section 4. And I won't go through every one of them, but there are some things in here. Generally, if law enforcement is going to use a drone to go into somebody's property, this bill generally is going to require a warrant for that purpose. There are exceptions. Exceptions when there's matters of immediate public health and safety. This section provides has a subsection in it that says law enforcement can't use an unmanned aircraft system for the purpose of enforcement of traffic laws. So this preempts that. If some municipal police department wanted to equip one with a radar gun, I guess, and fly it over top of Main Street and increase its ticket production, that this bill's going to prevent that. It says in here there's an out for that, not for that, but for law enforcement use generally. In subsection F, it says that law enforcement is permitted to use unmanned aircraft system where it could avert or mitigate imminent threats to human life, safety, property damage, or environmental damage. So we can imagine circumstances where police, whether it's state police or sheriff's department or other law enforcement agency with a drone, would want to and need to be able to use it for that sort of thing. So that's how our bill started a couple years ago. And so moving from that to Section 5, Section 5 has some prohibitions on the unauthorized operation of unmanned aircraft over designated industrial facilities. So we've had facilities in West Virginia, some of which are sensitive, contain dangerous chemicals. Concerns were expressed, I think valid, about, you know, we don't want people, unregulated, unlicensed, you know, flying drones over top of whether they're chemical tanks or other things that, you know, if there's an accident, could cause significant harm to humans or others. So there's a prohibition on that, except for people who have legitimate news gathering activity. That's provided for in here for as an exception to that, or permission of the owner, of course. An owner of a facility, a designated industrial facility, could give permission. Section 6 of the bill allows for rulemakings. And so it provides for rulemakings by the Commission in consultation with the Secretary of Military Affairs and Public Safety, the State Police, the Law Enforcement Professions Standards Subcommittee of the Governor's Committee on Crime, Delinquency, and Correction, are to propose legislative rules that would come back before the legislature for the consideration of the legislature regarding that. It does require in the rulemaking part that any rule proposed or promulgated must include provisions where the Commission will establish a protocol for news gathering over designated industrial facilities, which preserves First Amendment right to freedom of the press. So that's important to all of us, and we recognized in trying to craft this piece of legislation with some balance and circumspection that there are times, perhaps, when a designated industrial facility or the owner of it wouldn't want, for reasons that aren't in the public interest, wouldn't want a drone over that property. We're going to have a mechanism for the news gatherers in the exercise of their First Amendment rights to do that, irrespective of whether or not the owner grants permission. Section 7 relates to the admissibility of evidence in cases, and it's a simple statement. What it says, evidence that's obtained in violation of the provisions of this article is not admissible in court in any civil or criminal administrative proceeding. So if law enforcement, without a warrant, you know, uses a drone in violation of a person's Fourth Amendment rights, takes pictures in violation of constitutional rights, those photographs are not going to be admissible in court. Section 8 of the bill contains exemptions. So we exempt a number of things from the operation of the article. It says nothing in the article prohibits the operation of unmanned aircraft over the property of another person for the purposes of traveling from one location to another, provided that you're not capturing images that are going to be subject to publication. So you can fly your drone over another person's property if it's on the way to where you're flying it, as long as you're not taking pictures of who's lounging beside the swimming pool. You know, that privacy is important. The second subsection of this says that nothing in the act is to be construed to prohibit the use of a camera or optical navigation device solely for the purposes of navigation where no image is captured. So that was explained to us that, you know, some people broadcast what they see from the drone remotely to where they are so they can see and tell where it's going. And so we don't prohibit that. An exemption provides that a drone can be operated by agents or employees of the state agency for legitimate public safety, regulatory, or compliance assurance purposes if the operation is in compliance with the other provisions of the article. And our catch-all here says nothing in the article is construed to prohibit or regulate the operation of a drone, an unmanned aircraft system, in compliance with federal law and the Federal Aviation Administration regulations for purposes of a fire emergency response. So, you know, I think we're coming to the day, and we're seeing days where drones are used for all sorts of things. And what we wanted to try to do within this bill is to make sure we're not going to prohibit uses of unmanned aircraft that are going to be in the public interest, while at the same time balancing privacy rights with news gathering rights and all the other interests. And it's been a bit of a project. I know it is at some level now captured the attention of a number of West Virginians. Many of us have been contacted about the bill. Mr. President, I'll be happy to try to answer questions about it. Otherwise, urge passage of the bill.
Further discussion? The senior senator from the 4th.
That section about...
Does the gentleman yield?
Sorry. You yield to me?
Senator yields.
Reluctantly. The section about flying your drone over other properties but not capturing photos, what if you're on the scenic highway in Pocahontas County in the fall of the year and you want to take pictures of the foliage and you want to fly your drone out over the trees? Can you take that picture?
Let me make sure I understand the question. You're flying over what?
You're parked on the side of the road and you've got all the beauty of nature in front of you and you just want to fly your drone out and get a picture of all those pretty trees. Can you do that?
I don't think there's anything in the bill that prohibits that, as long as you're not within the threshold proximity of somebody's dwelling. You know, there is a buffer around people's dwellings contained in the bill, and there's a buffer around the designated industrial facilities. So if it's, you know, over top of somebody's designated industrial facility, my answer might be different.
Okay, I don't, it says over the property of another for purposes of traveling from one location to another. It does not say anything about a dwelling. It just says if I'm going from one location to another that's legitimate to me and I'm flying over a state park or something like that, am I violating this section if I take a picture and keep it?
No, no. Now, the rules are different if you are publishing the pictures. And so then if you're publishing pictures, and you have to have, I think under our bill, you're subject to the FAA regulations. You have to have commercial. The FAA issues licenses, commercial licenses for the operation of unmanned aircraft. And so what we're saying is, if you're going to, you know, be taking pictures to publish them or sell them, then you're going to be subject to the federal requirements.
So currently, I mean, I've seen West Virginia magazines and different ones. I mean, I'm just using this as an example where people go out and take pictures of the natural beauty of our state. They may do it from the side of the road or standing on a podium or whatever, and they publish those pictures in those magazines. This law then would say that if I fly a drone to get a little better shot of something for that publication, that I couldn't do that.
Okay, so if you're in compliance with the FAA and you have a license, I'm looking, this is under subsection 2 now. So subsection 2, excuse me, section 2, let me just flip to it. Operating an unmanned aircraft system for a lawful commercial purpose in compliance with, and it's 1, 2, 3. 1 is a license issued by the FAA. 2, all rules promulgated by the FAA. And 3, any waiver or exemption granted by the FAA to the person or business entity.
So I'd have to have a license to do that, but I could do that with a license. Otherwise, if I just took my drone that I just bought at Best Buy out to take pictures of a national park and took a picture and I'm running a little publication or a blog or something, I would be in violation of this statute.
I don't think, and I'm sorry if I guess it depends on where you are. If you're in a national park, I don't think you have an issue there.
Okay, so
I don't think you have an issue. If you're over the property of the senator from Monroe and taking pictures for commercial use, you have to have a license from
I
the
would
FAA.
understand that. I just read it property.
But if you're at a Coonskin Park or you're somewhere like that, this isn't going to prohibit you.
All right, thank you.
Further discussion? The junior senator from the 17th.
Will the chair yield, please?
Gentleman yield.
Just to clarify, so if I'm in a campground, and kids got a drone, and because they have rented these parcels next, and a lot of the campgrounds will have beaches on the lake like Summersville, and they're flying it up to get shots of everybody, or shots of their vacation or whatever, would that be in violation of this? And if they take that and put their pictures on Facebook or whatever, or on social media,
you don't have an expectation of privacy there, so I think the act doesn't apply. Now, what I would say to my friend and colleague from Kanawha County is that there's nothing in this bill that I'm aware of that would prohibit a park or a campground from adopting its own rules, if it chooses to, regarding the use of drones on its property. But this bill this bill by itself would not prohibit what you just described.
all right, and then again, if big snow comes along, you take your drone, you take some pretty pictures of the valley, you send that into WSA News, Channel 6 News shows your pictures on there, because you're uncompensated, you're still not in any violation because I don't have an FAA license to fly a drone.
I don't think so, no.
Thank you.
Further discussion? The senator from Marion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the gentleman from Morgan yield?
Senator Yield, he does.
Okay. My drone doesn't have a camera. So is a drone without a camera?
Well, we refer to them in the bill. Actually, we don't really use the term drone. We refer to them as unmanned aircraft systems, right? Isn't that what we're calling unmanned aircraft systems?
So I don't have a drone on my I don't have a camera on my drone, yet I can't fly it over my neighbor's residence because he's within 50 feet of me.
No, you can. Absolutely.
I can?
You can. Under this bill, as it's engrossed now, you can fly over other person's property to get where you're going with it, as long as you're not capturing images.
So, since my drone doesn't have a camera, I can fly it anywhere I want to.
Well, I won't say anywhere you want now. There are, you're still going to be subject to the rules regarding flying over top of chemical facilities or designated industrial facilities.
I understand that.
And there are FAA limits.
Yeah, I'd be subject to FAA rules.
There are FAA rules that limit how high you can go with them, right? What is the federal rule's 400 feet, isn't it? Right. So there's a federal rule that sets the limit, the maximum height you can fly a drone at 400 feet. And this bill doesn't address that, and I don't think we can. That's a federal rule.
Okay, so let me just make sure I understand. I take off with my drone, doesn't have a camera. I can fly it all over the neighborhood. Don't have to have neighbors' permission.
as long as you're staying under 400 feet, which would put you outside the federal rules, as long as you don't have a weapon on it, you know, if you're going to load a weapon on it, then that would be in violation of this bill. But yes, the gentleman is correct in his understanding of the legislation. You have to be sober. You can't fly it under the influence. No weapons.
Well, let me ask, I don't mean to belabor this, but I need to know. In fact, if I had a drone with a camera, and I have a picture in my office of my hometown. It has 800 residents. If I take a picture of the entire town, do I have to get permission from every one of those residents?
No, sir, not at all, because there is no expectation of privacy of, you know, an area of individuals when what you're photographing, even if you had I don't know how you did that without a camera, but if you had a camera and you took that picture, there's no expectation of privacy there. You're shooting the buildings, the streets, the traffic, the people. People have no expectation of privacy when they're out and about like that. But if someone were to, and I know the senator from Marion wouldn't do it, but if someone were to fly a drone, you know, up to someone's bedroom window and take pictures from the outside of, you know, inside the house, then there is an expectation of privacy there, and that's the sort of conduct that this bill tries to prohibit and proscribe. But like my friend from Marion County, a picture from the air of beautiful Fairmont, West Virginia, is perfectly okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further discussion? Further discussion, the senator from Greenbrier.
Thank you, Mr. President. If the senator will yield, please.
Senator Yield.
Certainly.
Gentleman may proceed.
I go back to publishing in the beginning. Publishing these pictures, what is publishing? Any place? Let me clarify why I asked that. If I'm publishing it on my website of my farm, for instance, but I have my neighbor's farm included in that, is that publishing a picture without their permission if there are people in the field at their home? Is that publishing?
We don't think so. Again, and there's not an expectation of privacy with respect to, I think, what you're describing, and so you wouldn't, whether it is or whether it isn't, publishing, you're not transgressing anything that is prohibited by this bill.
But it opens the right for my neighbor to complain and have those charges brought and that type of thing, correct?
To file a charge?
Well, I mean, to complain that I have invaded their privacy because my drone is flying above my farm, but they're in that picture and they happen to be in the yard.
Nope. In my opinion, there would be no basis for any such objection or a cause of action or anything like that authorized or created by this bill from what you just described.
Okay. Now let me ask about news gathering, and that was later put in this bill. I know it was amended in later. What is a legitimate news gathering organization?
It's a great question, and you'll not be surprised to know we spent a lot of time actually talking about that. And we had versions of this bill that actually included FCC license as part of it.
Well, it doesn't say that now, I don't think. But
there is a definition of news gathering that's in the bill, and it's in the first section, and it is subparagraph 7. And I'll read it to you. It says,
please.
News gathering means the act of obtaining facts or information by a person engaged in the business of broadcasting or otherwise publishing information about current events to the general public.
So if I operate a website, a news website, somebody's blog about something, I'm able then to fly a drone over and say that I'm gathering news. Is that correct?
Fly your drone where?
Over a site anywhere news can be gathered. Am I
an industrial, say a designated
yes.
industrial site? If you're in the business of news gathering, then you're, under this bill, you're going to be subject to getting the required FAA license.
Okay, so I'd have to have the FFA, because this simply means obtaining facts or information in the business of broadcasting. So I would have to have the FAA or FCC.
Yeah, if you want to fly your drone like over designated industrial facilities or other areas that might basically, that's basically it.
Okay. So news gathering then, well, you've answered that, I think. All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further discussion? The senator from Preston.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the senator from Morgan yield?
Senator yield. Senator does yield.
Thank you, Senator. I tried to listen carefully as he explained this bill and the things which a UAV operator may and may not do. Is there any treatment in this bill for the remedies for a landowner who is being, I realize that there's a law against flying within 100 feet of a house, but what is the legal remedy for that if I'm being imposed upon?
In order to answer your question, can you give me a hypothetical of what you're worried about, what the remedy might be?
Well, for instance, if I'm at my home and somebody is flying a UAV within 100 feet of my home and they're harassing me or whatever, do I need to call the sheriff's office and report this? Can I capture the drone? Am I in violation of the law if I capture it? You know, what's my remedy for that?
Okay, there's nothing in the bill that specifically prohibits you from capturing the drone. And what else you might do to it if it's over your property and hovering over your bedroom window or swimming pool or whatever, the bill doesn't address. We intentionally didn't put in any self-help remedies in the bill, if that's the gentleman's question.
Well, I understand that the person can fly a drone over top of my property if it's not within 100 feet of my house. They're not, and they're not taking anything which I would assume to be private.
That's true.
Okay, so if I were to capture this drone, which is not violating the law over my property, am I in trouble with the law then?
I'm not giving the legal advice to my colleague from Preston on this. I'm saying there's nothing in the bill that addresses that particular question. So, in fairness, I mean, it's a reasonable question. I guess the honest answer that I would give the gentleman regarding that is it's going to be up to the judicial branch of our government to decide.
I see. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr.
Yes,
President.
sir.
Thank you. Further discussion? Further discussion or droning on? Not the question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If every member voted. If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, there being 23 yeas, 9 nays, 2 absent and not voting, more than a majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed.